The legend of this fabulous personage, Prester John, in Italian language Prete Gianni, had been spreading throughout Europe for a century through a series of letters addressed to the Pope and to the major European monarchs, and was probably the result of a forgery made in Nestorian circles. The following years brought major changes in the geopolitical configuration of Europe and the Near East, but also of East Asia. In the East, the great Khan Monke brother, Hulegu Khan, through the brilliant military campaign 1256-1257, conquered Baghdad, the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate, in February 1258. The Christian powers obviously could not but rejoice at the news coming from the Near East, also because insistent rumors were circulating about the great Khan Kubilai will to return the Holy Land to Christianity through his brother. This is just a map of China before Mongol invasion. China was divided between two Greek dynasties. One dynasty in the north was not ethnically speaking Chinese. Jurchen people founded the Jin dynasty, and in the south there was the southern Song dynasty. To the west there was a very powerful little reign, the reign of Nanzhao, that covered the actual Chinese province of Sichuan, Yunnan, and also a little piece of Vietnam. And is the extension of the really big and powerful Mongol Yuan dynasty, and the great Khan was Kubilai Khan. It must be remembered that the Hulegu Khan wife, the name of this woman was Dopuz Khatun, she was of Nestorian faith. She was a Christian. At that time, Egypt, ruled by the Mamluk Sultanate, who had usurped the power of the Ayyubid sultans in 1250, seemed to be the next victim of Mongol fury. But once again, the sudden death of the Greek Khan in August 1259 changed the Eurasian geopolitics. In September 1260, a battle in Galilee between the Mongols and the Mamluks saw the victory of the Mamluks, of the Turks, an event that would not only halt the Mongol advance towards the Mediterranean basin forever, but would create the conditions for the future collapse and definitive disappearance of any Frankish possessions in the Holy Land. The new leader of the Mamluks, he was called Baybars, proved to be not only a great leader, but also a very skillful strategist. He succeeded, indeed, in dividing the enemy camp, allying himself with Berke, the new Khan of the Golden Horde, who had converted to Islam. You can see how this world was already globalized and how was really complex the geopolitics of this time between Islamic powers, Mongols, and Western powers. The conflict between the Mamluks and the Ilkhanate, that is the Mongols, would, however, continue intermittently for 60 years. Hülegu Khan had to give up plans to expand his new domain, consolidating his power over the territory of Persia and founding the Ilkhanid dynasty in 1260. This is the territory of Ilkhanids. Hülegu initiated a series of contacts with the papacy, further favored when, on his death, his son Abbaka came to the throne. Abbaka was a Buddhist, but very well disposed towards not only members of Nestorianism, but to all Christians. His wife, Maria, was the illegitimate daughter of the Byzantine Emperor Michael VIII. The same couple formed by the first Ilkhan, Hülegu, and his wife, I remember the wife was an Nestorian Christian, was represented in the West sometimes as the couple, very famous for Christianity, of Constantine and his mother Helena. You can see this manuscript that is stored in Vatican in the Vatican Library. Manuscript is Syriac 559, and it is possible also to see it on the web. In the 70s of the 13th century, the divisions between the European powers, the Angevin ambitions to conquer the Byzantine Levant, and Venice pro-Mamluk policy were the tombstone for hopes of reconquering the Holy Land. In a conflictual geopolitical situation, such as that of Europe and the Middle East in the 13th century, I could say that nobody changed in these centuries, because in the Holy Land was always, with this situation of conflict between peoples. The sudden, unexpected and aggressive presence on the Eurasian stage of the Mongols, associated with a series of legends and prophecies now integrated in the European cultural fabric, like the legend of Prete Gianni, of Prester John I just said, but also the legend of the lost tribes of Israel, for example, made it necessary to take a position at the new political initiative, especially on the part of the only universal power that could be considered representative of European civilization in a historical phase of fragmentation between nations. This power, this universal power, was the Church. The sending of missionaries to the East was therefore certainly a new phenomenon triggered by the Mongol conquest. It can also be said that in this century of contacts, each mission was an expression of the Church's strategic reaction to a new political and geopolitical configuration, to a new event that had loomed at the gates of Christendom. And now I go to the principal topic of my speech. I'm sorry for this premise, maybe a little bit complex, but it was necessary to let you know, the historical, background of this main history. In the history of such encounters, the figure and events of Giovanni da Montecorvino, John of Montecorvino, the first Catholic Archbishop of Katai, certainly occupy a special place. I do not have time here to dwell on the very little biographical accounts of the character. Suffice it to say that at the beginning of the 80s of 13th centuries, John was in the missions of Armenia and Persia, where he had to play a very important role, so much so that later, as soon as he ascended the throne in 1289, the king of Lesser Armenia, Hetum II, sent John as ambassador to the Pope, Nicholas IV. This Pope was very important. He was the first Franciscan Pope in the history of the Church. And Giovanni, or John of Montecorvino, was sent as ambassador to the Pope to inform the Holy See of the dangers that the Armenians were running because of the Mameluke. The meeting between Giovanni and the Pope took place at the beginning of July 1289 in Rieti, that is a little city north of Rome. And this meeting led to Nicholas IV's decision to send John of Montecorvino to the east with 27 official letters addressed to the rulers of Armenia, Georgia, the Ilkhan of Persia, the Mongol king of Persia. In that time, the Ilkhan name was Argun, the great Khan Kubilai in China, and also the Nestorian patriarchs. About the here I just let you see one letter which was sent by Persia Ilkhan, Mongol Ilkhan Argun, to the Pope Nicholas IV in 1290, now stored in the secret Vatican archives. There was a very rich communication between Persia Ilkhan and the Pope. But let's go to the voyage, to the trip of John of Montecorvino to Qatar. You can see the route he took. He reached Venice, where he embarked in August, maybe 1289. After a short sail, he landed in Antioch, then continued to Armenia, later arriving in the court of Argun, that is here. Finally, in the summer of 1291, after the death of Argun, he left Tabriz, embarked in Hormuz on the Persian Gulf, and landed in India, here, in Malabar, near Madras, where, according to an ancient tradition, the mortal remains of the Apostle Thomas were kept. Here he would stay for 1 year, erecting a church and also converting, baptizing the new believers. After 1 year, Giovanni continued his journey to China in the company of a very rich merchant from Genova in Italy. He landed in one of the Chinese ports of the time, probably in the south, maybe Guangzhou, Canton, or Quanzhou, that is Zaitun in Marco Polo Chronicles. Or perhaps Hangzhou, from which it was possible to reach the capital, that was the modern Peking, by sailing along the Imperial Canal. He finally arrived in Peking, that was called by Marco Polo Cambalik, in early 1293. Cambalik was a Turkish name. Chinese called the city Tatu. The meaning of Tatu is great capital, great metropolis. Here he delivered the papal letter to Kubilai Khan. Kubilai, when he arrives in Peking, Kubilai is very old. He will die in February of the next year, in 1294. You can see here two interesting pictorial representation of Kubilai. One on the left is a court painter. He was from Nepal, and he was in Kubilai Khan court and made this painting of Kubilai. And on the right you have the Catalan map. So it's a representation very famous that was which was made after the death of Kubilai. But Kubilai, you can see, is represented as a Western king. He has not Oriental traits or something like this. We have incomplete information about the missionary activity of John of Montecorvino. In fact, most of the data about John comes from the second and the third letters he wrote in 1305 and 1306. We know that John lived in Peking for 35 years until his death in 1328. According to the Franciscan missionary's second letter, written in Latin, he came into contact with the ruler of one people called Ongud as soon as he arrived in Cambalik. Just a little map about these people. Ongud people were very near to the family of Mongol rulers because they had a very, fundamental role when Mongols, Genghis Khan, Mongols, at the beginning of the 13th century, conquered a vast territory. Why? Because these people, you can see the arrows, the Ongud people were located just in Ordos region and just to the northeast of Ordos region. Well, at that time, in 1204, they were very important because they control a territory that was important for the Jin dynasty. Before I let you know, I let you see this map, just a second, of China in 12th century. Jin dynasty, this is the territory. Ongud was placed just here. You can see this place was very important because they were a sort of guards against the Mongols. What happened in 1204? They changed the alliances. They go with the Mongols. And so the Mongols have easy play to invade the territory of Jin dynasty. This happens in 30 years, until in 1234 Jin dynasty collapsed, definitely. At that time Genghis Khan was already died. He died in 1227. Okay? It's the same time that San Francesco. About. So, we return to the slide I was showing. This is the situation at the beginning of the Mongol Empire and the situation of Ongud forces. So, the leader at that time of Ongud decided to ally with Genghis Khan. And this kind of alliance was, reinforced from the marriages of the daughter of Mongol rulers with Ongud leaders. So, the leaders of this tribe, the Ongud tribe, were strictly linked to the Mongol ruler family. I hope this is clear. This kind of blood alliances in Mongol and Turkish language was called anda. That is a blood relation, very, very strict relation. Here you have the letter in Latin written by Giovanni or John of Montecorvino in February 1305. As soon as he arrived in Peking, he write, you can maybe, I don't know if you can read the letter, so we can save time. He met this leader of the Ongud. He called this leader the good King George. Okay? And say that this leader was Nestorian. Okay? But was immediately converted to Catholicism by John of Montecorvino and received the minor orders and served during the Mass with the missionary. Not only this, but he made his people to convert to Catholic faith and built also a beautiful church in his capital. The capital of the Ongud was not Peking, was another place. So this was the first Catholic church in East Asia in the history. And says that George was died 6 years before this letter. And the son, you can see the end of the letters, the son of King George, the name is John, because the king gave to the son the same name of the missionary, John. This is the story. What can we think of this story? A total fake? A total fiction? Well, it's not. It is interesting to say that in the beginning of the letter, the missionary links King George to the legendary figure of Prester John, or Prete Gianni. Obviously, Prester John was not a historical figure. Okay? So, at that time, the mythical territory or reign of Prete Gianni, Prester John, was located in East Asia. Later it was moved also to Abyssinia, to Africa, to India. It was a mythical, totally mythical reign. Well, it is a totally fiction, a fake. Well, we can find in Marco Polo dévisement du monde, or milione, we say it milione in Italian language, in the Chronicle of Marco Polo, we find the same King George. Marco Polo said that King George belongs to the lineage of Prester John, of Prete Gianni, the same news. King George thus seems to have realized in his person this union of temporal and priestly functions, which was already an attribute of the mythical Prester John. Nevertheless, the conversion to Catholicism of this mysterious personage, King George, remains a problematic point. This conversion does not appear in this manuscript that is stored also in the Vatican Library. That is a gospel, Vangelo in Italian language, written in Syriac language. Syriac language was the liturgical language of Nestorians. This manuscript has been written in 1298. That is 1 year before the death of King George. What says this gospel? This gospel has been discovered just 1 century ago in Turkey and was donated to the Pope in 1950. And now you can see it in the Vatican Library. The manuscript is dedicated to Sarah, this is the name, Princess Sarah, that is the sister of King George. But the manuscript is for Sarah, and also cites the brother of Sarah, George, has Nestorian faithful leaders, not Catholic. So, the writer of this gospel did not know anything about the conversion of King George. We don't know why. The conversion maybe was not true, or maybe the writer of the gospel, that is a chrysographed gospel, is very rich, it's beautiful. Maybe he was very far from China. He did not know about this conversion. We do not know anything. We do not know also why this gospel has been found in Turkey. Maybe the gospel was written in Mesopotamia, but we don't know if the gospel really arrived to Sarah. Sarah was wife of another Mongol ruler, and she lived in China, not in Mesopotamia. So we don't know if this manuscript ever arrived to the lady, to Sarah. Recent discoveries seem to support the hypothesis that this conversion was less evident than it appears in John of Montecorvino letter. And this is very recent, in the 90s, but the studies about this just appeared in 2015. In Mongolia, Ulan Tolgoi, were found some inscriptions on the rocks with the sign of King George. And the inscriptions were written, 2 inscriptions in Syriac language, that is the holy language of the Nestorians, and 1 inscription was in Chinese language. And 2 inscriptions cite a psalm, I don't know in Spanish, Salmo? Salmo, in Italian too, okay. From the Bible. And it's very interesting to say that the inscription in Chinese is dated 27 of July 1298. we know that that day in the summer, just few months before his death, King George was in Mongolia, very far from Peking, in a military expeditions against enemies of the great Khan of the Mongols, because he was allied, bloody allied of the Mongols family. Okay? One of the descriptions in Syriac is very interesting because it's a quotation from a Psalm in the Bible that is father of orphans and defender of widows is God in his holy dwelling place. This verse was used in the tradition of the Nestorian Church in prayers in Sundays, Domenica, okay? And we know that 27th of July of 1298 was a Sunday. So we are sure about the day in which was written this inscription. Okay, we have this is all about the Western sources, the letter of Giovanni a Montecorvino, the new finds. But what about the Chinese sources? We have something about the King George in Chinese sources? Yes, we have. More than one. Obviously, we cannot find the name George. George is just a Western rendering, transcription of Georgish, that is a Syrian rendering of the name George. In Chinese ancient sources, we have a phonetic transcription. You study, I think, Chinese culture and language also, and you know that it's a big problem when you have to translate Western name. I have just seen in his study the transcription of Professor Ruiz's name. They use 5 Chinese characters to translate and to render the name and the surname of Professor Ruiz. And the same is for everyone. So, you have also in ancient time a transcription of Georgish, that is quoligis. This is the transcription. You have here one modern representation of this heroic leader of all good people that I just found on the web in History Modern Manual of Chinese people. The Chinese sources give us an interesting and singular picture of King George, but they are absolutely silent on the religious orientation of King George. They say nothing about Nestorianism or Catholic faith of George. The biography of George is found in the history of the Yuan dynasty, the Yuan Shi. It is possible to see it and translate it without some problem. Maybe it's written too small, so I can read the first thing. Well, the topic is that George had a brave and fearless nature. It was a hero. He was skilled in military matters, but also he was a very cultural man. So you have to forget the image of a nomadic ruler, totally without culture. George understood the Chinese. George wrote most probably Syriac language. Maybe he spoke also Mongol language, and maybe he studied Latin with Giovanni of Montecorvino. Not only this, But according to the Chinese chronicle, historical chronicle, George was well versed in cosmographic, cosmological culture, Confucianism, and also he patronized the publication, for example, of one commentary of the, I don't know in Spanish the name, Libro dei Mutamenti,
De los cambios.
De los Cambios. You know this book? It's very famous, a divinatory book. He gave maybe money to the author of a commentary about this book. So he had also one hall of 10,000 yuan, that is chapters, a very big library in his capital. So the image of this ruler is getting more and more complex. You have not only a hero, in Italian we say un cavaliere, cavaliero, no?
Un caballero.
But without culture, a nomadic cavaliero. No, this man was very cultural man. You can see here the end of this man. He was maybe too how to say, he was left alone against the enemy. The enemy took him. He refused to betray the Mongols. And the historian chronicle say they even wanted to give him a wife, but he said firmly, I am the imperial son-in-law. If I do not personally obey the emperor and the empress, how could I marry again? The enemy did not dare to force him. In the end, he did not submit and died there. The chronicle does not say they killed him. It's probable. They killed him. It's probable. So this is the biography. So this biography gives us this picture. We must assume that George died in the first months of 1299. It's accordingly also it's perfect with the letter of John Montecorvino, because in 1305 he said that the king died 6 years ago. So we have a correspondence between the Latin letter of Giovanni and the historical chronicle. So, a devout Christian, a knight without fear, a cultured intellectual able to fully penetrate every doctrine, from Confucianism to cosmological techniques. Who was George really? The discrepancy between Giovanni da Montecorvino portrait and the Chinese sources has led some scholars to believe that in this case, as much as and more than in others, the intention of an author can influence the nature and content of a description. In a word, it's perception. I think you are accustomed to many many historical chronicles. You have always to see every historical chronicle thinking of the time in which this chronicle has been written, about the perception of the author. You could not, how to say, rely immediately and have 100% how to say, faith in one historical chronicle. Also in contemporary history, modern history, and obviously also in Chinese history. So some are saying, okay, these chronicles were, how to say, influenced by the perception of the author. For the Giovanni da Montecorvino, George's Catholic faith was the fundamental aspect the military activity of King George made him absolutely similar to European caballeros and aristocracy of the Middle Age. And in the eyes of the missionary, did not seem something so interesting or exotic as his religious faith. On the Chinese side, the religious doctrine has never been a central element in historical accounts. If you see ancient historical accounts, Chinese accounts, of any personage, you never see a very deep illustration of religious faith of the personage. You have to see other sources, not the historical sources. Many of the details presented by John of Montecorvino correspond to historical reality. Even the information about his child. John of Montecorvino says, the child of King George was called John, in my honor. Well, in Chinese sources, the son of King George is called with these characters, that today we read Juan, very simple characters. An is the character for peace in Chinese language. But Juan is the rendering, phonetic rendering of an Italian Giovanni, or maybe a dialect from the south of Italy, because this missionary was from a place not so far from my city, from Naples. In Naples dialect, Giovanni is Juan. So it's very similar to Juan, the transcription of Chinese name. So also we have another correspondence between Chinese sources and the letter of the missionary. Many other interesting elements are to be found in the sources, such as the presence of a Catholic church in the capital of King George, and the tradition concerning the expedition led by Juan, with which George's incorrupt body was found. I will arrive in a minute to this. We must consider another historical element. I had said before that Giovanni left Italy in the summer of 1289 to go to China. Okay. Just 1 year before, one religious man of all good people, Nestorian man, arrived in Italy. This is a story just specialist people know, but is not known to the great public. We have chronicles of this voyage of this man in Syriac was called Rabban Sauma. Rabban is very similar to Rabbi, that is the title of Jesus also, master. Rabban Sauma was a Nestorian religious man that left China with another man that was his disciple called Marco. They arrived, they wanted to go to Jerusalem, but they stopped in here, in Ilkhanid territory. Why? Because Nestorian Church Center was there. When they arrived, the leader of Catholic or Nestorian Church died. So they choose the disciple of Rabban Sauma to become the new leader, Catholicos is the name of the leader, of Nestorian Church. So they stopped in this place. After some time, the Ilkhanid leader sent Rabban Sauma as an ambassador to the Pope. So in 1288, Rabban Sauma arrived in Italy. He went by boat at a certain point. In the chronicle, he described the Mount Etna, you know, the volcano in Sicily. And he writes in Naples, where he described the battle between Aragons and Anjouin. In the day it was Easter, how to say in Spanish? In Italian, Pasqua.
Pasqua.
Oh, okay, same way. Pasqua of 1288, if I remember well. So he met the Pope. The Pope was the same Nicola IV, the same Pope that the next year sent Giovanni da Montecorvino in China. Okay? The Pope hugged him, said to him, okay, come with me to celebrate the Easter Mass in our big church. We have all the data about this, history, absolutely. He was given also the title of Archbishop by the Pope. This is proof of another thing. It's proof that an Nestorian church, a Catholic church, the Pope did not see him as heresiarcha, because he let him in the church, he let him in the Mass, he gave him the title of Archbishop. So he gave to Rabban Sauma all letters for the Ilkhan, all gift and so on, and Rabban Sauma go back in autumn 1288 to Ilkhan of Persia. In that time, the end of 88, Giovanni of Montecorvino, where is Giovanni da Montecorvino? Just there. He will come to Italy later. So it's most probable that he met this man. Because the church of Rabban Sauma was just, according to the sources, was just adjacent to the court of the great Ilkhan. And Giovanni was received by the Ilkhan and met other religious leaders. So it's most that probable that he met this holy man Rabban Sauma. The year after, 1289, Giovanni in the summer meets the Pope. The Pope gives him the letter and Giovanni goes to the east. So it's just a case that when he arrives in Katai, the first people he met is the leader of the same people, the Ongud of this Rabban Sauma. In my vision, is not the case. It's not casual, of course, because he had some kind of a mission, in my opinion, to meet the leader of these people, because he knew that these people were Nestorians, of course. This is just a deduction, of course. So, some words about the mysterious church of this King George in his territory. In his letter, John of Montecorvino states that in his territory, George built a beautiful church according to royal magnificence to honor our God, the Holy Trinity, and the Lord the Pope, calling it in my name the Roman Church. And after King George's death, John says, since I was alone and had no way of getting away from the emperor, I could not go to that church, which is 20 days walk away, far from here. The most interesting ancient Ongud urban site in this area is just where maybe the church was located, is called today Olonsumein Tor, is in Inner Mongolia, that today is one autonomous province of China. The Chinese name is Aolun Sumu, that is a transcription of Olonsume. The walls of the city measure approximately 900 for 500 meters and are now in a very bad condition. These are the walls, the remains of the walls of the city. The ruins of the city were discovered by Juan Wenbi, that he was part of a very important expedition, the expedition led by the Swedish Sven Hedin in 1929. Subsequently, the finds from the area were analyzed also by Owen Lattimore. Chen Yuan, it was a very important Chinese who studied the relation between China and the West in ancient time. And in last years, I was lucky to meet him in a conference in Genoa. Guy Chalin, it was a very important archaeologist. He died just a few years ago. But there was also a Japanese. His name was I don't know if I have the photo. Okay, no problem. He was called Egami Namio. He was particularly interested in the Christian presence at the site, and he visited the site of Olonsume several times. Once last Western visit was made in 2001 by University of Genova with Chinese archaeologists. So they made just, how to say, a surface superficial examination, very interesting. And in this place were found also in ancient time this kind of slabs. You can see the cross. This is the Nestorian cross. It's different from Catholic cross. It's similar to the Greek cross with the 4 dots. You can see the dots. Is a typical Nestorian tombstones, okay, found in this and another place. And this place you can see here on the right, it seems a little hill, maybe is what remains of the church. You can find it strange, but up to this day, nobody has still made some really serious archaeological excavation of this. Just the Japanese archaeologist Namio Egami found some little shards, porcelain shards or ceramic shards, but nobody made the excavation. Well, the University of Genoa wanted to make them, but Chinese, how to say, side asked so much money, at that time more than 200,000 euros. For University of Genoa was a real problem to find this money, so everything stopped. In another source, that is the Chronicle of Rabban Sauma, the holy man of Nestorian faith, the capital of the Ongut people is called Kaoshan. This name, Kaoshan, is very similar to the name Kosan, that is the city visited by another Italian missionary, Odorico da Pordenone. He was coming from Catai in 1328, and maybe the place is the same place. Odorico calls the place the principal city in the territory of Prester John, another time this mysterious personage, but is not impressed by this city because he says that this city is little that the Italian small city of Vicenza, that is a city not far from Venice, but not so big. So the mystery of this church is still alive and waits for a serious excavation. And now about the second mystery, a very unique tradition in Chinese sources. We have no sources in Chinese tradition about incorrupt bodies. Of course, we know very well the tradition of incorrupt bodies. We have our Christian saints, many saints. In Chinese tradition, there is nobody. I don't know if you study Chinese religion. There is the autochthonous religion of China. It's called Taoism. Well, Taoism is a very ancient tradition. If you follow some practical, how to say, alimentation or meditation, you can leave your body, so your body disappears. This is tradition, but there is not a tradition about incorrupt body. So in China there is not this. So this strange story is in one ancient Chinese source. That is an epigraphical source, written about 1315 by this Chinese man that is called Liu Mingzhu. In short, the son of King George, how to say, is very desperate because his father's body is in a very faraway land. And he says, my grieving heart wishes not to continue living. So I want to return his body to our family ancestral cemetery. So he wants to organize an expedition to find the body of his father that is very, very far away from Peking, and to bring the body to the cemetery of the Onggud leader's family. So the emperor says, Xuan, that is Giovanni, is really a filial son. Is full of xiao, that is a virtue, no? Confucian virtue, filiality, the respect for the father. So the emperor gives the money, gives caballeros to organize this expedition, and they go there. The place where George was buried was in a very far away place. Today is near to the border between Xinjiang, it is autonomous province, Islamic province of China, and Kazakhstan. Okay, from Peking to there is 2 months of trip. When they open the tomb, I stress these words, they saw that the body of the ruler was still as if alive, after more than 10 years. They changed the burial robe, they clothed him, everyone was crying, also the people coming from that place, everyone crying. It's a very strange scene for the Chinese sources. And they carried the coffin until to ancestral cemetery of the Onggud family. This is the story. So, we have no parallels in Chinese sources. As you can see, natural preservation practice are different, of course, from this story. We have in ancient China a tradition of preservation of corpses. The example more famous is Lady Dai, Xin Jue. It was a noble woman, died, as you can see, many years ago, that was found in a burial place 50 years ago. The lady was found incorrupt, It was found inside a liquid substance, so the archaeologists take the lady. Now the lady is not a really good to say image, but you can find this news about on the web. Her hairs were black, and she was perfectly, how to say, entire. It's not like the mumia, the mummies of Egypt. But we have just parallels with the incorruptibility of George's corpse in Western tradition. The interesting parallel with the history of the Tatar prince of the Golden Horde, another Mongol prince known as Coctoganus. He too was converted to Christianity in the early 14th century by Franciscan missionaries, like Giovanni da Montecorvino. His incorrupt body was preserved in Franciscan church on the Volga River, to the west of China, of course. He was identified with the Khan of the Golden Horde or his younger brother Kutukan. So we have two parallel history, King George incorrupt body and this king of the Golden Horde incorrupt body. Just two parallels. But, and these two have many parallels. Both are Mongolian princes, both are Christians, both come into contact with the Franciscan and are baptized by Franciscan. Both are found incorrupt at the time of exhumation, before a translation of the body, and also there is a relative temporal proximity of the events. The story of King George is more ancient. So, why this narrative? First hypothesis, the moral and intellectual exceptional status of George could be enough to explain. Or, at this origin, there is the influence of the Christian tradition of the incorruptible body of certain saints, formed at least since the early Middle Age. I have just made some research. We have just history of incorrupt saints' body from England, maybe the most ancient, from the 8th century. But we have also one history of a Western king incorrupt body, Edward the Confessor, an English king, already mentioned in the early 12th century as the author of miraculous healings. I can remember a very important historical study of Bloch about the power of the kings to heal, and also about this king. He was canonized in 1161, and his incorrupt body was translated to Westminster Abbey in 1163. So we have one tradition of one king that was also found incorrupt before King George. But let's go to finish my too long speech. So, in conclusion, behind the apparent distortion of perception evident in John of Montecorvino's letter to his brethren lies the awareness of a mission, probably desired by Pope Nicholas IV, whose final objective was the contact with King George. The conversion of the on-good ruler of King George, narrated by John, would be part of a deliberately simplified narrative intended for his brethren. This exceptional meeting between two worlds was therefore not a case, not accidental, but was in all probability prepared and desired, perhaps by both parties. Thank you.
Bueno, pues muchísimas gracias, Juliana, echa una mano. Miguel, deja la sección hispánica de estudios sinológicos y atiéndeme. ¿Se ve bien ahí la cámara? Mi móvil.
Sí, sí, sí.
Muchísimas gracias, Mauricio. Ha sido una conferencia no solo muy interesante, sino gracias también por el inglés, porque has vocalizado muy bien y se ha entendido todo perfectamente. Y aparte para mí ha sido una... Estoy muy contento por dos razones, por tu ponencia. Una, por la ponencia, por la calidad, por el inglés, todo eso va junto. Y otra, porque como yo os he dicho muchas veces a vosotros, y lo he dicho también en esos encuentros académicos que nosotros nos encontramos, ¿por qué estoy yo aquí hablando de estas cosas chinas a vosotros? Porque yo, cuando tenía 15, 16, 17 años, antes de ir a ayudar a mi padre en Hinojoso del Duque al campo, me veía la famosa serie La Ruta de la Seda, de la NHK y de la CCTV. El primer proyecto, la primera vez que los chinos, tras la Revolución Cultural, dejaron entrar una televisión extranjera y ya hicieron el recorrido a la inversa de la Ruta de la Seda hasta Roma. Un documental que os recomiendo encarecidamente y que es un documento ahora mismo arqueológico en sí, porque eso se hace en el año 78, 79, 80, llegan a Afganistán cuando empieza la guerra, llegan al Irán que acaba de estallar la revolución, llegan al Irak donde están empezando a excavar y hablan de todo esto. Me han recordado los felices años de la adolescencia. Hablan de todo esto. ¿Sabéis acaso, hijos míos, lo que es un nestoriano? ¿Cómo se ve un nestoriano? Esto que os acabo de decir es una conferencia que, si no llega a ser gracias a esta fundación y a la invitación de Mauricio, seguramente la mayoría de vosotros es la primera vez que lo oís hablar. Por lo tanto, por favor, valorar absolutamente la novedad y lo importante que es que esto se haya podido contar aquí. Y ahora bien, abro el turno de preguntas. Lucas ha viajado por allí y Lucas puede saber de lo que estamos hablando.
Well, first of all, thank you for the wonderful talk.
Thank you.
My question is about why was King George an exception? In the sense that most of the Turkic leaders ended up converting to Islam, like the Ilkhanate, the Golden Horde, the White Horde. So, if we've seen how Turkic leaders, they could effectively convert to Christianism, why did most of them end up converting to Islam?
Oh, well, I am not a specialist of, how to say, this topic, but I think the situation was very complex, because in one moment I speak about the Ilkhan territory, Ilkhan reign. First, this reign was relatively short-lived, because Ilkhan reign was about 1 century. And if you see the history of this reign, that I repeat is not my specialization, but you can see a kind of, how to say, progress in the religious belonging of the Ilkhan. First, you can see, how to say, that, for example, in Hulegu, the first Ilkhan, you can say that Hulegu Khan, his fate was the fate of his fathers. So we can define shamanistic fate. Shamanistic is a label I don't like so much, because it's a label, you put a label, but it doesn't mean anything today. But later, the son of the first Ilkhan, that is Abaka is Buddhist. It seems strange. But after Abaka, you have Argun. Argun was not, he did not have an Islamic faith. After Argun, you have this, how to say, this new Ilkhan, they were Islamized. But I just tell you what I know. The Islam was a very complex, how to say, scene. It was not monolithic. So, for example, this is the reason why the Mamluk Baybars was so, strategically speaking, so cunning to, how to say, to divide the Mongol unity and to make an alliance with a ruler of the Mongol who was Islamized. So the situation at the time is very, very, very complex, and we have to consider that the Islamic world was not a unified world in this period, from the half of 13th century to the first years of the 13th century, to the 14th century. This is a very complex situation. In Ilkhanid world, after Arghun death, that is in 1291, that is the same year when Giovanni da Montecordino go away. He goes away just because the new Ilkhan is Islamic Ilkhan. He does not like so much the Christian people. So in a situation of turmoils, Giovanni da Montecordino prefers to leave. So the situation was very, very complex. But we have a start. Historical start is 1260, when the Mongols lose the battle against the Mamluk in Syria. And when they lose the battle, the situation in the Middle East, how to say, change, will remain very complex with periods of war against the Mongols for 60 years. But from this date, 1260, the Mongols will have no more chances to arrive to the Mediterranean. And this event is very important from the history of Near East, also for the future history, and for the history of the Islamic world, of course. It's similar to another event that was in 1241, when the Mongols arrived in Hungary, and they arrived just near to Vienna and in Moravia. They could go very easily to Germania, but in that time there were two events. One was the death of the great Khan in Mongolia. And when the great Khan died, the leaders were forced to return to Mongolia to choose the new Khan. First event. Second event, how to say, the scarcity of food for the horses. In that moment, the Mongols in 1241, they decide to go back, some of them to the Volga River, very far, some of them, the leaders, to Mongolia to choose the new Khan. This was the salvation for Europe. Because in that time, all the sources in Europe were expecting the Tartaros. This is in Latin, because the name of the Mongols was Tatar. It was changed in Tartar, because they were coming from the Tartaros, that is the hell. They were seen in a strange, ambiguous way. One way was they are coming from the hell because they kill everyone. But the other side, well, we could use them against the Muslims. They could be converted to Christianity. This was the hope, not only of the Pope, but also of many people in Europe, the possibility to convert the Mongols, also because there were this strange history about Prete Gianni, about this kingdom, mysterious kingdom in the east, that was already Christians. So they said, okay, these people maybe are coming from that kingdom. We could convert them very easily. The women in their family are already Christians. This is true. they were the women's were many of them were Nestorians. They took the crosses. So they hope, okay, the wife is Christian, let's hope the husband will get Christian. So religion, geopolitics, personal ambitions are very mixed.
Ha sido mejor que hablar de Marco Polo, porque de toda esta época apenas se sabe nada, y nosotros siempre hablamos del mismo personaje, y los colegas portugueses que han pasado por este curso, como también somos ibéricos, hemos hablado siempre de Clavijo. Entonces hablo de Clavijo, es un representante castellano que en estas épocas va hacia el este buscando al Preste Juan, en español es el Preste Juan, para hacer esa alianza, enviado por los reyes de Castilla para hacer esa alianza. Aquí, más allá de Gonzalo de Clavijo y de Ibn Battuta, que como es de origen andalusí, nosotros los portugueses también decimos que es nuestro, aparte de sus dos personajes, apenas conocemos, parte de todos estos no conocemos a ninguno. ¿Más preguntas? José María.
Bueno, excuse me, I prefer to speak in Spanish for more precision. Excuse me. Me parece, please translate. Me parece que la conferencia ha sido tremendamente interesante, ameno para mí, para la formación que yo he ido adquiriendo a lo largo de la vida, porque ha cubierto una zona donde había o yo al menos tenía una oscuridad y una tremenda confusión.
I understand.
Sí. Siendo una realidad histórica, era una realidad histórica muy movida. Y entonces, ¿qué duda cabe cuando estamos hablando de Eurasia, que es el terreno donde eso se produce? Es imprescindible conocer lo que estaba ocurriendo en una parte importantísima de Eurasia, que era toda la zona de contacto entre Oriente y Occidente, vamos, entre Europa y Asia. O sea, me ha resultado realmente esclarecedor, y también decir un poco lo que decía el profesor Ruiz, que es que, no sé, en la enseñanza, en la formación que hemos adquirido, esa zona nunca nos la han aclarado lo suficiente.
Yes, I understand. In Italy too, it's difficult to have, how to say, a deep knowledge about this topic. And this is a problem, because we can see here, how to say, the roots of some historical later processes. I think this is very, very, very important. And if for the medieval history, professors or experts is, I think in the last years, for the first time, the importance of Mongols as also as how to say, cultural agents for the West. This in the last year has been finally stressed, because before Mongols were seen just as a destructive force. Maybe, of course, this is also true, because they completely wipe away the Rus, Kiev, territory we today know very well, but also they were also a kind of carrier of cultural elements for the cultural exchange. Mongols leaders were very interested to other cultures, but not very interested in how to say, in the conversion to Christianity. We can see the letters, because the Pope always says to the Mongols, why you kill our people, our faithful people there in Hungary, in Hungary, and so on. Why don't you convert? And the Mongol leader doesn't understand this position, because he said, okay, but we just conquer the territory because there is just one God, and we do this because God, the only God, permit this to us. So if we conquer anyone, this is God's will. Also you, Pope, have to submit to us, because it's God who said it. So this was the normal, how to say, the normal tune in Mongol letters that were written in Persian language or Latin to the Pope. So it was a difficult relation, but Western missionaries were always treated very well by the Mongols. Where we have 1 century between the half of 13th century to the half of 14th century, just 1 century. We have many missionaries. They go to Katai, to China, but they go also to Karakorum, that is the capital of Mongol forces in Mongolia, and they were treated very well. We have another missionary that made a chronicle. He says, okay, the wife of the Great Khan came to the church, and after that the husband also came inside the church, but I cannot say he was converted. He just wanted to see inside the Bible what were the images, what were the history narrated in the Bible. So they were very curious, culturally speaking curious, but they did not convert to Christianity.
Un momento antes de otra pregunta, porque tienen clase ahora, si tienen que ir, pero antes de que os vayáis, pues hay otra pregunta. Cosas de infraestructura. El trabajo se va a entregar a través de la plataforma. Esto tiene una asignatura oficial en el campus virtual de la universidad. Para entregar los trabajos del curso os habilitaré la pestaña, ¿vale? Hasta el 1 de junio no se tienen que entregar. Punto 2, el examen de hoy. Yo voy a acompañar al ponente al almuerzo, pero vuelvo. Es decir, el examen va a empezar con Sergio y otros 2 compañeros PhD, y yo sobre las 3:30, como muy tarde, estoy en el examen. O sea que el examen tiene 2 partes. Una primera parte, que son 10 preguntas cortas, que se hacen en 15 minutos, las hacéis y os las recogerán, y luego tenéis 1 hora 45 minutos para responder a 2 preguntas de desarrollo de una opción de 3. ¿Vale? Así que ser puntuales, ser formales, y a las 1:30 estoy yo allí. ¿Vale? Bueno, ahora que se tenga que ir, sin mucho ruido, que se vaya. ¿Hay alguna pregunta más?
Dinos una pregunta de examen.
Raúl, dice nuestro amigo Ángel, un saludo para ti, que hablo en tercera persona. Raúl no miente. Yo en clase he dicho las preguntas. Si no habéis venido, no me habéis escuchado, pensáis que miento, pero las preguntas las sabéis, son las que os he dicho. Cuidado con las 10 preguntas de desarrollo cortas, porque me gustaron mucho. Eso quiere decir que los kazajos son asiáticos. Ni siquiera sabéis eso, yo pensaba que lo sabíais. Imagínate, en cada examen hay 2 mapas, en un examen hay 2 mapas y una foto. En otro examen hay 2 fotos y un mapa. Muchas gracias, un aplauso y ya nos vamos.
Gracias.
Mi è piaciuto moltissimo, anche perché ho letto ai visibili, è molto interessante, appassionante.